The question rang out in the Fort Stewart Military Academy's graduation hall like a sharp cut tearing through the fabric of camouflage my family had painstakingly woven for years. All eyes turned toward me, the woman sitting quietly at the back of the auditorium. No uniform, no insignia, just a gray blazer and a pair of worn-out boots. Some heads turned slowly, as if verifying whether I truly existed or was merely a fleeting mirage. I didn't answer right away. I only looked straight into the eyes of the commander who had just walked in, General Darren Holloway, who had fought under my command in Fallujah. His gaze was stern, but it couldn't hide a flicker of emotion. Beside him, a glass tumbler shattered on the granite floor, its sharp echo piercing the frozen atmosphere. My family sat a few rows away. My mother gripped her wine glass so tightly her knuckles turned white. My father suddenly became engrossed in the graduation program, as if it had turned into a classified document. Natalie, my sister, the one being honored today, froze mid-conversation with a young officer, her smile slowly fading. I am Avery Dawson, and this was the first time in years someone had publicly called me by my true name and rank. For the past 20 years, I lived in the shadows of strategy tactics and meticulously crafted silence. I left West Point in my second year, no explanation, no trace. On paper, I withdrew. To my family, I gave up. But the truth is, I was recruited into a top-secret special operations unit after completing a psychological warfare simulation I wasn't supposed to win. That victory got me chosen. Every year on my mother's birthday, I sent flowers. At Christmas, a card arrived at their doorstep. No rank, no message beyond wishing you peace. No one replied. No one mentioned me. They told neighbors I had chosen a different path, a polite way of saying I'd been erased from family history. And now I sat here at Natalie's graduation, the sister my mother once introduced to church friends as the perfect version of Avery, if she hadn't given up. I wasn't on the guest list. No one invited me. But I came anyway, like a piece of memory they tried to bury but couldn't fully erase. Fort Stewart hadn't changed much. The air still thick with ceremony and discipline, the walls adorned with flags, the chairs arranged as precisely as a tactical map. I chose a seat in the back row, under the shadow of a pillar where the stage lights couldn't reach. If you've ever been cut out of a family photo, you'd understand the feeling present, yet erased. I was once the eldest, the inspiration. But in the latest photo, my mother hung in the living room, I was gone. They took new pictures for holidays, reunions, and I was always absent as planned. Have you ever been forgotten by your own flesh and blood? If so, leave a line in the comments. I want to know how many of us have been shadows in our own stories. The ceremony began with trumpets, military music, and the salute to the flag. I saw Natalie step out from backstage. Her posture was impeccable, each step brimming with pride. Her uniform was perfect, every crease pristine. I used to look like that before war unraveled the seams. The front row was reserved for dignitaries. My mother sat in the center in a navy blue dress and a flawless pinned hat. My father sat beside her, his eyes occasionally scanning the officers like a veteran reminiscing. Not once did they look back. I felt like the only one breathing in a space suffocated by denial. Then came the introduction. Please welcome Lieutenant Natalie Dawson to the stage for her speech. The auditorium erupted in applause. Natalie stepped forward, the light catching her freshly minted insignia. She stood tall hands on the wooden podium. I come from a family with a military tradition. My father was a military engineer. My mother worked in cryptography. And my sister Avery once attended West Point. She paused. I felt the air around me freeze. She chose a different path. Some nodded faintly. A few soft chuckles came from the left. No applause. Just a heavy silence. I wasn't angry, not disappointed. Just a tightening in my chest. Not pain, but the sensation of an old scar when the weather changes its stings to remind you it's still there. When Natalie stepped down from the stage, her eyes swept the auditorium. For a split second, they met mine, but she turned away quickly as if unsure of what she'd just seen. I didn't blame her. When someone grows up in a family that only speaks of honor but not of wounds, they learn to deny what doesn't fit the ideal. Natalie had learned that lesson well, but the real lessons were waiting behind the scenes. Some decisions can't be rewritten, and some names are erased from history before they even have a chance to exist in it. I still remember the day my name vanished from West Point's records, not because I failed, not because I quit, but because I did the opposite. In my first year, I topped the class in applied tactics. In my second, I broke the simulation lab record by completing a psychological warfare test in 23 minutes, a test no one was supposed to finish. Not only did I complete it, I turned the system against itself. 3 days later, I was called to the commander's office. No congratulations, no smiles. Just a black folder, no label, stamped classified. We need you to leave the standard training system, a man in civilian clothes said. And never speak of this again. I signed the document knowing that from that moment, Avery Dawson, the outstanding West Point cadet, would cease to exist in any public record. My name, my history, my achievements all transferred to a top-secret file under strategic command. I became a shadow. My family didn't know. They only received a letter stating I'd withdrawn for personal reasons. No one called. No one came looking. My mother told relatives I couldn't handle the pressure. My father nodded silently. I thought they'd ask. They didn't. Years later, during a special leave back home, I stood outside their house, only to leave after a few minutes. Not out of fear of rejection, but because I wasn't sure I could still be called their daughter. Have you ever vanished from your own home? Have you ever stayed silent, waiting for someone to ask why, and no one did? If so, leave a message. I want you to know you're not the only one cut out of a family story, just because they didn't understand you. I joined a top-secret program called the Shadow Unit. We didn't exist on any military map, no badges, no official ranks. Every mission was a clean slate. I learned to live in silence, to laugh at the question, "What do you do?" and to answer military admin like an endless inside joke. I rescued hostages in Fallujah. I led a special ops team to destroy a terrorist database in Tigris. I endured 3 temporary detentions behind enemy lines. But what my family remembered was Avery left West Point, and no one mentioned her again. One spring morning after a short mission, I returned to my small apartment in suburban Arlington. On the kitchen table was a navy blue envelope embossed with Fort Stewart's insignia. I carefully opened it. Inside was an invitation to Natalie's officer graduation ceremony. Stiff paper silver ink clearly stating Lieutenant Natalie Dawson. The oath and commissioning ceremony would take place on July 4th in the main hall. Attached was a small note in my mother's familiar handwriting. "If you come, please dress appropriately. Don't embarrass your sister. No, we look forward to seeing you. No mention of me, just a request not to cause shame." I held the note, feeling like it was a strange kind of summons. Not a military duty, but a family one, where I had to be present, yet not truly there. I set the note down, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small object, my unit ring. Still gleaming, though scratched in places. I tried it on, then took it off. It wasn't ready to be revealed. Or maybe I wasn't ready. In another corner of the drawer, I found an old letter from Marcus, the unit medic who died in a mission in 2014. Before he left, he wrote, "Avery, if I don't come back, remember honor doesn't need to be recorded. It just needs someone brave enough to carry it in silence." I folded the letter, tucked it into my chest pocket. This time, I wouldn't stay silent. Before flying to Fort Stewart, I stood before the mirror wondering if they'd still recognize me, the girl who said she'd protect the world, but couldn't protect her place in the family. Have you ever stood before loved ones and felt like a stranger, like you had to reintroduce yourself to those who once sang you to sleep, if you have leave a line? Maybe just one other person reading it will feel lighter. On the way to the airport, I drove past rows of flags along the boulevard, each one a reminder you can love your country, fight for it, and still be forgotten by the place you belong to. I didn't bring a uniform. No insignia. I carried memories, the ring, the letter, and a faint hope that Natalie still remembered the eyes of the sister who read her stories during power outages. The flight took off on time. I looked out the window, clouds swirling below like the dust of history I'd once been buried under. Fort Stewart awaited. But this time I wasn't going as a shadow. I was going to see if amidst the lights of honor and the blare of trumpets, anyone still dared to face the truth. Some things seem insignificant, but carry the weight of a lifetime. For me, it's a scratched silver ring and an unsent letter. I started packing before dawn. Not because I feared missing the flight, but because the silence before sunrise always made it easier to breathe. My small apartment sat on the 3rd floor, above a permanently closed laundromat. No one knew I lived there, and I didn't leave much behind: a few clothes, a bedside lamp, a bookshelf full of encryption manuals and old strategy books. On the top shelf was a small wooden box, no lock, no label. Inside was my special ops ring, handed to me in a ceremony with no flag, no photographer. We called each other by code names. And then, we vanished from the system. I picked up the ring, the cold metal brushing my fingers. Its face bore the unit's symbol, a broken sword wrapped in a black ribbon. Inside engraved, "Silence is the blade." I didn't put it on. I just slipped it into my inner pocket, where there was still room for one more piece of memory, Marcus's letter. Marcus was a combat medic. Not tall, not quiet, but always the last to leave the trench, the first to volunteer to go back. Before the Fallujah campaign, he left a letter in my backpack when I wasn't looking. I only found it days later, cleaning out my bag to send back to base. "Avery, if I don't come back, remember, not everyone gets their name on a stone. But if you're alive, you're our memory. Hold on to it. Don't let anyone erase it. Marcus." The memory of that campaign is like a forgotten film, blurry, flickering, but always resurfacing at night. We breached through a drainage tunnel past 3 layers of barricades and heavy fire. By the time we reached the hostages, the clock read 04:11. They were bound blindfolded, but alive. We got them out. But an explosion rang out when the second group was spotted. I heard garbled radio chatter shouts. Over the comms trap triggered fall back. Marcus was the only one who ran back into the smoke. He saved 2 people, then vanished. 4 didn't return. Their names live in my memory, not in any official report. The entire operation was classified top secret. The final report had no names, mine or theirs. Just mission completed. No civilian casualties. Afterward, I was summoned to command. No medals, no ceremony. Just one line. "Good, stay silent, you've done your part." I asked, "What about Marcus? What about those who fell?" They looked at me. One said they sacrificed. "You lived. That's the story." But no, that was never enough for me. Have you ever seen someone buried in oblivion? No flag draped over a coffin. No name in a death notice. Just a blank in the personnel log, noted missing in action. If you've lost someone that way, someone not properly remembered, leave a word for them. A name, a memory, a story. Because I believe the dead still need the living to speak for them. I kept Marcus's letter for 11 years. Never read it aloud. But that night, after General Holloway saluted me in front of the hall, I returned to my room and opened it again. I read it as if he were standing before me with his familiar half-smile. Honor doesn't need an audience. It just needs someone willing to carry it. I sat on the edge of the bed, the dim yellow light falling on my hand holding the ring. The ring, once heavy, once cold, now felt warm, as if my teammates were pushing it back to its place. I slipped it on. For the first time in over a decade, I let it stay unhidden, unashamed, uncovered. The next day, I walked through the old barracks. Each step felt like a tap on the foundation of the past. The buildings unchanged, the paths unchanged. But I was different. I was no longer the shadow they thought I was. I am the bearer of the memories of those who are gone. A survivor not by luck, but by duty. Are you carrying a piece of someone's memory who's left? Are you living for someone who no longer has the chance? If so, you're not alone. And if you're ready, leave that story here. I'll read. We'll read together. Not all apologies need to be spoken aloud. Some come in a trembling voice in a crowded room, not aimed at anyone specific, but reaching exactly who they're meant for. I hadn't planned to attend the morning training session. The schedule read basic leadership training, skills and inspiration. A model simulation for young officers designed from textbooks with little room for reality. But then I heard Natalie would present to the class. Curiosity, or rather I needed to know what she'd do with the new truth after General Holloway's handshake. The training room was on the east side of the barracks, white walls, chairs in a U-shape. About 20 young officers, all in crisp uniforms, new ranks on their shoulders, eyes sharp but still green. Natalie stood in the center, remote in handshirt, buttoned to the collar hair neatly tied. The ceiling light made her look like she was under a microscope, every move scrutinized. She started with a tactical diagram team assignments communication in command the difference between authority and influence. Everything perfect. By the book. Then she paused. 1 beat. 2. The projector light stayed on, but no one looked at the screen. Natalie took a breath. I want to share something not in the materials. Her peers looked up. She continued, voice steady but slightly trembling. I used to think leadership meant having the loudest voice in the room, making decisions, giving orders. But recently, I learned something else. She paused again, then turned to face me directly. The room followed her gaze. In that moment, I knew Natalie wasn't just teaching, she was conversing. I have a sister, she said, whom my family tried not to mention. I was taught she gave up. I believed it. I even repeated it, confident I knew the story. No one spoke. I didn't see pitying looks, just absolute focus. But the truth is, she didn't give up. She just followed a path no one was brave enough to take, and no one was allowed to talk about. I didn't blink. My throat was dry, but I didn't look away. Natalie went on. We wear the same uniform, but not everyone endures the same. My sister endured a loneliness none of us were trained to bear. A pause. Someone nodded slightly. A female officer set her pen down. I'm not here to boast about my sister. I'm here because I stayed silent. I was complicit in denial. And the worst part, I believed it. I saw her shoulders tremble faintly, but she didn't back down. She stood firm like a true leader, not because of rank, but because she dared to face herself. Leadership isn't about speaking the loudest. It's about daring to right a wrong, even when no one demands you admit it. The room was silent. It felt like someone had pulled the air out, leaving space for thought. Natalie lowered the mic, said no more. No conclusion. No plea for sympathy. Have you ever witnessed an apology unspoken, yet truer than any excuse? If so, I want to hear from you. Those stories have more healing power than any formal lesson. After the training, I waited in the hallway. Natalie stepped out, forehead glistening with sweat, face flushed not from shame, but from freeing herself. I knew you were there, she said, not looking directly at me. I didn't do it for forgiveness. I just thought it was time to stop pretending. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Sometimes silence is all it takes to rebuild a bond from scratch. That evening I returned to my room, opened the small box where I kept fragments of my old life, Marcus's letter, a map from the last mission, and the only photo left our team laughing amid Fallujah's dust. I added something new, a handwritten note from the training where Natalie wrote the opening line of her speech. True leadership is daring to look back. We can't change the past. But sometimes a small act, a word at the right moment, can soften the hard edges of memory. Have you ever seen someone change in an unexpected way? Not because they were forced, but because they chose to do right. Share it. Your story might light the way for someone lost in the dark. Some visits come unannounced, but it's because they're unannounced that they're sincere. I was about to leave my office when a familiar figure appeared through the glass door. She stood there, back straight, clutching an old canvas bag, cream-colored shoes worn but polished. It was my mother. I never imagined her at Fort Stewart. Never believed she'd travel over 1,000 miles through years of silence to stand before me. No protocol. No schedule. I opened the door. Do you have 5 minutes? She asked, eyes not meeting mine. Her voice was the same, calm, concise, like she was calling me down for dinner. I nodded. Led her inside. A leather chair, a jug of water, a few unfiled reports. She sat, opened her bag, and pulled out an old tin box, faded, one corner dented. She placed it on the table like it was the only thing she dared leave between us. I think it's time I gave it back to you. I didn't rush to open it. My hand rested on the lid, feeling the cold metal seep into my skin. I've kept it a long time, she continued. Not because I feared losing it, but because I wasn't sure I'd ever have the courage to hand it to you. I opened the box. Inside were yellowed scraps of paper, a few old black and white photos, and a stack of carefully cut newspaper clippings. Not major papers, just small stories tucked quietly in the back of local military publications. U.S. Special Forces aid Fallujah. Operation Team Leader names undisclosed. Unnamed Valor hostage rescue mission with no claimant. Shadow Commander who led the Iraq victory. Next to each was my mother's tiny pen marks. Could be you. This date matches when you went silent. Brief but enough. I looked at her. She still didn't meet my eyes, only focused on the handkerchief twisting in her hands. I didn't know how to love you right, but I never stopped loving you. I listened, my throat catching. Not from emotion, but from a heart wrestling between wanting to believe and fearing another wound. Why never say anything I asked? Because I thought you didn't need it. Because I feared if you stayed silent, I was wrong, and I didn't want to be wrong. Her voice softened. You were silent, so I thought you regretted it. Then I let people lie about you even in front of Natalie. I stayed quiet. I was wrong. The box stayed open. Silent keepsakes she'd held on to, not from duty, but from a love she never knew how to show. A photo fell out. I recognized it instantly, a group shot at West Point my first-year graduation. I stood between my two best friends, arms over their shoulders, laughing unguardedly. The odd thing, I'd never sent that photo home. Mrs. Ruth, my friend from the academy, sent it to me, she said, as if reading my thoughts. She said, "Your daughter's exceptional, top of the class." I kept it since that day. Have you ever realized the person you thought was coldest was the one who remembered every tiny detail about you? If someone's silence made you misunderstand them, tell me. Sometimes care comes not in words, but in how they preserve the scraps of memory you thought they forgot. I said nothing more. I just closed the box gently, like sealing an old wound not fully healed, but no longer bleeding. She stood, didn't hug me. I didn't step closer. But for the first time, the distance between us didn't feel like a chasm. Before leaving, she paused. "Natalie told me about the training." "You've forgiven her, haven't you?" I nodded slowly. "And me," she asked her question, light as a breeze, heavy as stone. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't ready. That night, I placed the tin box on the table next to Marcus's letter. For the first time, I felt the two parts of me, the soldier and the daughter, no longer at odds. Both had survived the nameless. Do you have a box like that? One holding not objects, but things left unsaid. If so, I hope one day you're brave enough to open it, or let someone else see it. Maybe forgiveness begins with a wordless nod. I was drinking coffee when I got a text from an old colleague, Czech War Truth blog. "New post about you." My stomach tightened instantly. War Truth is an anonymous blog in the military community exposing gaps, scandals, and rumors. I opened the page. The headline hit like a punch. General A.D., Shadow Commander, or Cause of Hidden Civilian Casualties in Fallujah. The post was long, meticulously detailed. Battle diagrams, timestamps, even excerpts from a report erased from official records. The words tore through the layers of protection I'd built over years. Insider sources claim the Desert Echo Operation Commander authorized shelling without fully confirming civilian positions. 4 dead, 2 children. I knew exactly who wrote the real report, and who held the only copy. That night I dug through my archives, made encrypted calls, traced metadata. The post was drafted from a military IP through a public network accessed once. But what chilled me, the initial digital trail led to Natalie's laptop. No, it couldn't be. I didn't want to believe it. I requested temporary access to internal security systems. With my old clearance, I still had some privileges. The data confirmed yes access from Natalie's device at the exact time the post was prepared. But another sign, the data was uploaded via high-level encryption software used only by those in special intelligence strategy like me, and only one other person from that group. Ruiz, whom I trusted, whom I commanded, who stood beside me in Fallujah's worst days and sent me a letter 3 weeks after the campaign ending with unmistakable words. I thought, "We could be something if you'd let us." I never replied. We never spoke of it again. He was reassigned official reason reporting protocol violation. No one asked more. No one suspected more. We quietly severed ties. I called Natalie. Her voice was hoarse with worry. "Sis, I swear I didn't know. My laptop. I left it in the library during a presentation. I didn't think, it's not your fault. But it started with you." I didn't speak in anger. I was just stating the truth. And truth always leaves a cold aftertaste. Natalie went silent. For the first time since her public apology, I heard real fear in her breathing. Have you ever found out someone who walked through fire with you, pushed you into the dark? Not with words, but with an invisible click. If so, tell me. Sometimes betrayal isn't in weapons, but in distorted memories. I didn't need more time to think. I couldn't let the truth be manipulated. I sent an internal summons request, an emergency meeting, no press, no official record. Just those directly involved. I needed to know if they'd keep dodging forever. Before sleeping, I reopened the old report, the unedited one. My notes were still there. Civilian casualty probability 4%, inconsistent intelligence. But if no action within 2 hours, hostages would be moved. I made a choice. I saved 32 lives. And if asked today, I'd choose the same. The next morning, I walked the headquarters hallway where my photo once hung among top cadets. It was long gone, but I didn't need a frame to remind me who I was. I just needed a chance to tell the truth. Not for me, but for those no longer here to speak it. In my special report, I wrote, "Silence is sometimes loyalty, but when silence nurtures lies, it becomes betrayal." I signed Major General Avery Dawson. Natalie and I went to Maryland on a breezy evening. GPS led us to an old industrial area, desolate cold. Warehouse 17 sat nestled among abandoned buildings, a single yellow light glowing from a small window above. Inside, Ruiz was waiting. No weapons, no team. Just a man standing straight under a lone ceiling bulb, like a staged play. And we, the final audience. "You're always punctual," Ruiz said, not turning around. "I never liked being late," I replied. Natalie stood quietly behind me, her hand brushing her phone, backup recording on. I'd prepared a personal recorder on my watch. Just one right sentence from him. Ruiz turned eyes locked on mine, no evasion, no excuses. "I knew you'd find out. Your mind, always a few steps ahead. Then why do it?" He shrugged, then stepped closer, as if distance no longer mattered. "Because I knew you'd react like this. Quietly. Recording. Preparing evidence. Calculating every move. You're the one who never makes mistakes, except with emotions." "Don't make yourself tragic, Ruiz." He smirked. "I don't need to be tragic. I just need to be remembered." Have you ever seen someone destroy another's reputation just to prove they still exist? To force someone to look back even in anger? Share if you've witnessed someone go too far just to avoid being forgotten? "You used Natalie," I said, voice low. "You used my software. You planted malware in the system through her device." He didn't deny it, exactly. You knew she wouldn't check permissions. "Because she trusts you, and I trusted that." He pulled a small USB from his pocket, tossed it onto the wooden table nearby. "Original data's there. Edited reports echo Split's source code. You can use it to clear every charge." I didn't move. But why, Natalie asked, her voice soft, but sharp as a blade. Why destroy everything she protected? Ruiz looked at her, showing a flicker of something guilt or pride unclear. "Because your sister doesn't need anyone. She's respected even choosing to live in the dark. Me, I'm not mentioned. I'm the shadow behind the campaign. I saved people too. I sacrificed too. But when I speak, no one listens. Your sister. She just stays silent and the world gets curious." Natalie stepped forward, her voice hardening. "My sister doesn't need to be loved, but you need to be hated to exist. That's the difference." Ruiz stood still. For a brief moment, everything sank into silence. I pressed the button on my watch. "You're being recorded. And under internal security protocols, I have the authority to detain you for potential strategic intelligence leaks." From the corner, 2 military police stepped out. I'd sent coordinates earlier while Ruiz was still talking. He didn't resist. Just one last line as they cuffed him. "You won't stay hidden anymore, Avery. You'll have to answer to the public. And they'll ask, why were you silent so long?" I met his eyes, because I respect those who didn't survive to speak the truth. But now I'll speak for them. That night on the drive back, Natalie said nothing for the first 3 hours. But as we turned into Fort Stewart's entrance, she whispered, "I'm not scared anymore. Not of the truth, not of you. Just one thing." I glanced over. "I'm scared no one will believe you. No one knows how many lives you held onto in silence." I touched her hand lightly, a sign someone knows. "And she's sitting beside you." I walked into the Pentagon's 3rd-floor conference room, hosting the annual Military Strategy Ethics Symposium. Though familiar with the gray walls, steady footsteps, and boots clicking on the stone floor, today felt different. No medals pinned to my chest, no name tag, no rank, just me and the truth. Over 300 officers from colonels to generals, from infantry to NATO reps, sat upright in orderly rows. Hands clasped, eyes fixed on the wooden podium. I stepped up to tell a story I'd held too long. "Some battles have no name," I began, voice low but clear. "Some commanders have no monuments. But every decision carries weight, and someone has to bear it." No one stirred. No coughs. No flipping papers. I continued. "Fallujah. That year we were ordered to observe longer. Wait for confirmation. Wait for a signal from intelligence. But I made the call before final orders, because I knew waiting meant writing obituaries for 32 hostages. I pulled a black and white print from my pocket, a diagram of the crumbling factory where the rescue happened. A red circle marked on it. We lost 4. And a wall collapsed nearby. The press called it civilian casualties. I called it the cost of action. No one was wrong, but no one was fully right either. I paused, looked at the silent rows. Some nodded faintly. Some looked down. I asked them, "If you had to choose between saving lives and following orders, what would you pick?" I want you reading this to ask yourself the same. Sometimes discipline and conscience don't align. If you've faced that, tell me. I want to hear truth from other fronts. I'm not here to plead innocence, I continued. I'm here to confirm I was there, with all the fear and all the responsibility. The room stayed quiet, no interruptions. I wasn't right. I just couldn't wait. And because of that, 32 people are still alive. I signaled the coordinator, and she stepped up Natalie. She wore her uniform, but this time her eyes held no naive sparkle. They carried weight and maturity. She took a deep breath, then said, I used to think rank was a reward for effort. I was wrong. She turned to me first time on stage without keeping distance. Rank isn't a crown. It's a burden. And my sister carried a burden I once called failure. A murmur rippled, but no one looked away. I'm sorry, publicly. To the military, to my sister. Then she bowed her head. I didn't move, but something in me cracked like ice thawing after many winters. After we left the stage, the general who dismissed my report years ago, Lieutenant General Lorne Gallagher, stood. A man known for being cold, rigid, by the book. He raised his hand to his forehead, a full, formal salute. One person, then two, then the whole room. I didn't bow, didn't smile. I just stood receiving what I no longer thought I'd have recognition without proclamation. After the symposium in the lounge, a young female lieutenant approached. She didn't ask about the campaign. She asked, Has there ever been a time, Major General, when you felt too tired to carry the truth? I nodded. Yes, but being tired doesn't mean you're allowed to stop. Have you ever stood in a crowded room and still felt alone? If so, you're not alone. And if you've overcome it, share with me. Sometimes what we say becomes a compass for others. On the way back, Natalie handed me a small cupcake. On its white frosting, written in edible ink, General, Sister, Ghost. I didn't cry, didn't laugh, just placed it in a box to keep. When ordered to form an internal investigation team for the Fallujah file leak, I didn't know the first task would be facing my entire family as their commander. Fort Stewart's underground coordination room was colder than I remembered. Maybe the old ventilation, or the eyes unsure where to land. The central screen listed the 4 team members. Avery Dawson, team leader. Colonel Thomas Dawson, systems analysis specialist. Margaret Dawson, personnel. Data retrieval Lieutenant Natalie Dawson, IP and device tracing. No one else. No outsiders. For the first time in years, my family was complete. But not for dinner. Not for a Christmas photo. To investigate a crack threatening our careers and reputations. No one started with apologies. We started with work. I outlined the leaked data flow from the internal system exploited by the hidden figure Ruiz through an initial oversight on Natalie's device. Strangely, without silent insider coordination, Ruiz couldn't have accessed so deeply. My father Thomas studied the system diagram thoughtfully. Someone held an internal key too long. Could be old tech personnel. Or he stopped, didn't continue. My mother, calm as ever in classified meetings, slid me an access timeline analysis from 2 years prior. She didn't look at me, just said, The software trail points to one source. Ramirez had access via the Ghostline project card. Only 2 approved it, you and your father. I didn't blame them. Didn't ask who stayed silent. For the first time, they didn't deny it. They acted. And that was strange but comforting. Natalie spoke least but typed fastest. She didn't excuse her past mistake, just quietly checked auto backups. Here, she said softly, I found Ramirez's code, but it wasn't just to track your file. It was to reconstruct the entire shadow network from the Fallujah campaign. I looked up, realizing if that data leaked, many would be at risk. Not just me, not just my family, but teammates who fought and lost in silence for over a decade. We worked 19 hours. No shouting, no blame. Just keyboards stacking printouts and occasional silent glances. As the sun set for the second time since I arrived, I looked up. We've traced the data's last location, a secondary archive Ramirez set up in an underground facility in Northern Virginia. My father nodded. We need to go there. For the first time, I heard him say we, not you or her. My mother stood. I've let silence ruin enough. No more. Dear friend, if you've had to work with those who hurt you, can forgiveness start with action? Not words, share. You might hold the key for someone else reading now. At 01:47 a.m., we sat around the cold steel table, all 4 of us. No one left early. No one pretended to have elsewhere to be. For the first time, I didn't feel alone in this mission. We were a team. Not perfect, Not easy, but a team. I turned off the screen's light stood and said, "Tomorrow morning we move out. We chase what hasn't been said." My father smiled faintly. "First time I'm on a mission under my daughter's command." I looked at him. "And the first time I get to choose my team." We left the investigation room, no one mentioning the past. No one spoke of unsent letters, missed dinners, or averted eyes. Because tomorrow we weren't parents or siblings. We were teammates, on the final front. When the official investigation report was done, I was called to the Pentagon again. They offered a televised commendation ceremony, a formal speech, a medal to reclaim honor. I read the proposal in its pale gold envelope, then slid it back to the Defense Department rep. "I decline." He raised an eyebrow. "Major General Dawson, do you understand what you're refusing? This is a chance to correct the record, for the public to know the truth." I nodded. "Exactly why I'm declining. If justice needs applause to stand, it's too fragile to save anyone." I chose another path. No medal, no stage, no cheers. I returned to Fort Stewart, applied for a new assignment advising and training female special ops soldiers. I taught them to stay silent when needed, but also when to stand and speak. In the first class I wrote on the board, "Honor isn't in records, it's in choices when no one's watching." A new recruit, red-haired Callie, raised her hand. "Have you ever had to choose silence, Major General?" I looked at her. "Many times, but the last time I chose not to. And that changed everything." Natalie visited me in the final week of training. No dress uniform, just a white shirt and sneakers. She didn't need to say much. I saw in her eyes a relief I'd once wished for her. She handed me a small silver box wrapped in plain brown paper. I opened it. A cupcake. On its white frosting, written in slightly shaky script, "General, Sister, Ghost." I looked at it a long time. Didn't eat it, just smiled. That evening I walked past the old training grounds where I'd led teams lost people had my name erased. No one was outside. Just the wind and the smell of earth. I stopped under the flagpole. The special ops ring on my finger caught the moonlight. I placed my hand over my heart, not to salute, but to feel. I no longer needed recognition. I'd seen enough. I'd been seen. Dear friend, have you ever chosen silence because you thought there was no other choice? Have you forgiven, not with words, but with action? If you've been there, leave a few lines in the comments. Maybe someone reading with you will find courage. I'm not a hero. I'm just a soldier once forgotten. But today I choose to stand, not to be remembered, but to no longer be misunderstood. Not every feat needs to be written in books. Some feats just need to be seen with empathy. And sometimes silence itself is an action. Some stories aren't meant for applause, but to be heard. My journey from a name erased from records to being seen by my own family isn't a hero's tale, but one of resilience, forgiveness, and a longing to be understood. I share it not for pity or praise. I share it because I know out there, others like me quietly carry responsibility, pain, and decisions no one knows. If you've chosen silence, been misunderstood, forgiven without apologies, this story is for you. If something in my journey touches you, leave a comment. I want to hear your story, because maybe you'll be the next voice someone needs to hear. And if you believe true stories should be told with kindness and sincerity, hit follow. This journey isn't over, and I hope you'll join me.